You probably heard the big news over the weekend. 26-year-old male shooter going into Umpqua Community College in Umpqua, Oregon, shooting 9 people dead, injuring many others before ultimately killing himself following a gun battle with the police officers that responded. The 26-year-old shooter lived with his mother very close to the community college, described himself on social media as well as on online dating profiles as a, quote, conservative Republican. The shooter was carrying, by some reports, at least 3 weapons, by other reports, as many as half a dozen weapons, including a long gun and multiple handguns. 7 other weapons were recovered from the home where he and his mother lived, according to officials. For more context, and this is really important, you should know that the shooter's mother bragged about the number of guns that she owned. She argued in favor of so-called open carry gun laws in chat rooms and on social media websites. She posted, quote, "You can't be that naive, can you? It's ridiculously easy to understand the apprehension associated with open carry. I moved from Southern California to Oregon, from Southern crime mania to open carry. An open carry law won't work anywhere. And when the mood strikes, and as long as we're tossing around brand names, I sling an AR, Tech 9, or AK over my shoulder, or holster a Glock 21, or one of my other handguns like the Sig Sauer P226 and walk out the door. I find the shotguns are a little too cumbersome to open carry." The shooter, seemingly obsessed with mass shootings, including recently downloading a BBC documentary about the Sandy Hook tragedy called Surviving Sandy Hook. Now, things you will hear and that we've already been hearing in response to this shooting and why they don't make sense. People saying, oh, don't politicize the gun element of this tragedy. That is ridiculous. The gun element of this tragedy is political. And it's political because of one political party and the ideology that they have with regard to guns that is not helping to stop this kind of thing. Those who say don't politicize it have been politicizing it in the exact wrong way. You'll hear others say this isn't really about guns. It's, for example, about mental illness. That's also ridiculous. Of course, most people who go on a shooting rampage like this have mental stability issues, but the overwhelming, drastic, insurmountable majority of mentally ill people do not go on mass shootings. They are not violent. They are not a danger to themselves or to others or to society, period. So saying it's just about mental illness is a distraction. Yeah, we need to talk about mental illness in the US, but we also have societal illness here, where much more than in other countries, people think about using guns to solve problems or to remedy situations that they don't like. And that is a societal problem. And then lastly, and this is particularly insane in this particular situation, don't blame the guns, blame the parenting. Specifically, this particular shooter's parenting, apparently, which was focused on open carrying guns rather than raising well-adjusted kids. At least one student was carrying a gun on campus when the attack occurred, but John Parker Jr. decided not to intervene. And as we've talked about many times, the idea that good guys with guns in these situations makes everything better is ridiculous. Think about it in the context of the Aurora, Colorado shooting. An FBI analysis of 160 active shooter situations between the years 2000 and 2013 showed, not surprisingly, that only one of those shootings was stopped by a concealed carry license holder who happened to also have been a U.S. Marine. 4 were stopped by armed guards who were armed as part of the sort of status quo of that situation. 2 by off-duty police officers, and 21 by unarmed civilians. The idea that concealed carry heroes in these situations make the situation better is empirically false. The last thing I want to touch on is people very quickly get into this talking point coma of laws. Gun laws don't deter criminals who are determined to get guns illegally. It's very weird because the same right wingers say voter ID laws will work to deter people from fraudulent voting, which, by the way, essentially doesn't exist. Drunk driving laws do deter people from driving drunk. Laws against murder make sense. Nobody's arguing to get rid of murder laws and statutes because, hey, if you're determined to murder someone, it doesn't matter what the law is. But all of a sudden, gun safety laws do nothing. Now, as we talked about it with Evan DeFilippis recently in his analysis of the data. Gun laws do deter some would-be criminals. Gun laws make obtaining guns, practically speaking, a little more difficult for another portion of would-be criminals. But also, and very importantly, gun laws create a very specific framework under which we can prosecute violation of those laws. So it is not merely for its deterrent effect that we have these laws. We have the laws because they are part of the framework that is a logical part of society. And of course, that allows us to then give proper punishment to those who ignore the law. Now, one of the most disturbing elements of this entire fiasco, aside from the fact that a 26-year-old killed 9 people in yet another mass shooting, are the details of Douglas County Sheriff John Hanlon, and I want to discuss that next. Douglas County Sheriff John Hanlon is the sheriff involved in dealing with the aftermath, we can say, of the shooting perpetrated by 26-year-old self-described conservative Republican, son of a gun nut mother in Umpqua Community College, Umpqua, Oregon. Okay, what do we know about Sheriff John Hanlon? We know that he strongly opposed gun safety measures that were recently proposed in Oregon. We know that he is a member of the public gun-toting militia known as the Oath Keepers, which we've reported on. This is the same group who said they would use their guns to prevent bigot Kim Davis from going back to jail for breaking the law in Kentucky. Rob Price told the Trace magazine that while Hanlon is not an official member of the Oath Keepers, he attends meetings and he offers guidance on gun laws and Second Amendment issues, and was described as active by Rob Price. In 2013, Sheriff Hanlon wrote a letter to Vice President Joe Biden saying, if the federal government passes any gun safety legislation, including that mandating expanded background checks for private sales, that he would refuse to follow those laws. We are linking to the letter in the description to this in this YouTube clip. It is laughably asinine, but it goes even further. The month after the December of 22 Sandy Hook massacre in Newtown, Connecticut, Sheriff John Hanlon posted a video called "The Sandy Hook Shooting Fully Exposed." This is another one of these conspiracy theory videos about Sandy Hook, including ideas that there was more than one shooter, that the grieving parents who appeared in the media were actually actors, Alex Jones stuff. So, in thinking of the entire context of this horrible, tragic shooting in Umpqua, Oregon, let's not fall for this trick that the pro-gun nuts are using of, hey, don't talk about gun safety laws because that's politicizing an event that shouldn't be political. No, this is a political event because of the status quo around guns in this country. Let's not forget, in addition to that, that the last almost 3 years that we know of from Sheriff John Hanlon may well be at least a part of the context in which this shooting happened. And that is truly disturbing and horrible. And we're going to continue talking about that during the week as we get more information about it. There's a recent study in the Journal of Sex Research, that is, which challenges the notion that men who watch porn are more likely to hold sexist or negative beliefs about women. The data from the study were drawn from the GSS, which is a huge personal interview survey that's been done every 2 years, dating back to 1973. The men what did the survey uncover? The survey uncovered that men who watch porn, actually, I should say it a different way. Men who admit to watching porn are slightly more likely to identify as feminist than those who don't admit to watching porn. On the topic of women in positions of power, non-watchers of porn were slightly more likely to say that either women should focus on taking care of their homes, or that they would be against a woman being president, or that they believe men are simply better suited emotionally for politics. So non-watchers of porn were slightly more sexist and misogynistic on that question. Also, non-watchers of porn were slightly more likely to think that women should only be working inside of the home. Also, when it comes to abortion, non-watchers of porn were slightly more likely to be against abortion. And lastly, non-watchers of porn were slightly more likely to favor the so-called traditional family arrangement where the male is the breadwinner. The margins by which there was a difference on these questions between the porn watchers and the non-porn watchers was pretty small. But this is the most important paragraph from an interview with the study's lead author, Taylor Kohut. Quote, "It's important to keep in mind that correlation should not imply causation. My colleagues and I think that our findings are best explained by third variable factors. There are certain groups of people that avoid porn who also tend to hold more gender non-egalitarian attitudes. If we assume that there is no relationship between pornography use and gender egalitarianism, then including these people will lead to a positive bias in the results. Our findings may simply reflect the presence of people who avoid porn use and hold more gender non-egalitarian attitudes in our sample." In other words, if you don't watch porn or lie and say you don't watch porn, you may also be, for example, part of a religious conservative group, which is already more likely to hold non-egalitarian points of view. Thus, it is not that the porn is in any way causally related to the lack of sexist or misogynistic views, but rather that there are third variables that are influencing this. Another element is that people often lie about watching porn. So it could be that those who are willing to admit that they watch porn might already be more open when it comes to gender roles and egalitarian ideas. Yes, correlation and causation are two different things, but very often correlation can be very interesting to analyze and discuss, and this is absolutely one of those cases. And I look forward to hearing from you about your thoughts on this study. For a long time now, I've been talking with you about the idea that there are elements within so-called progressives and the progressive movement that are actually quite anti-progressive or even regressive in some cases. And this has caused a lot of sort of conflict between elements of progressivism and people like Sam Harris and Bill Maher and Richard Dawkins, etc. I've spoken with Dave Rubin about this on the program before, and there's an interesting clip from the most recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, where Richard Dawkins and Bill Maher actually talk about what they describe as the regressive left. Let's take a look at that.
Because our friend Sam Harris coined an interesting word this week, a phrase, regressive leftists. You know, the people who don't quite get it about being liberals in the world. I know you were championing somebody named Maryam Namazi.
Oh, yeah.
And you and our great friend Salman Rushdie got her reinstated. She was going to speak, as so many people have at universities, and then they get disinvited because she's an ex-Muslim and was just speaking her mind, but apparently that's hate speech in this world. So what did you and Salman...
I am shocked about the way on university campuses, the principle of free speech, when I think that the old university I went to, University of California at Berkeley, the free speech movement in the 1960s, what a betrayal we're seeing now.
Right.
With campuses all over the Western world, all over America and Britain, are denying people the right to come and speak at campuses. If you can't speak your mind on a university campus, where can you? I mean, that's what universities are about. It's about free speech. It's about being brought... It's about being exposed to ideas that you haven't met before, perhaps you're hostile to. If you only ever get exposed to ideas that you agree with, what kind of a university would that be?
But also this notion that somehow Islam and Muslims are this protected species, that if we talk about them at all or criticize at all, it's somehow hurting or humiliating Muslims.
Yes.
And it's a ridiculous
and it's
idea.
confused with racism as well, because an incredible number of people think Islam is a race.
Yes. Oh, I've heard that, yeah. Right.
And so they think that if you criticize Islam, you're being racist.
Right, or...
And you're absolutely right that the regressive Muslims give a free pass to Islam, whereas they kind of write about everything else. I mean, they write about misogyny and all the other bad things in that case.
You're talking about repressive leftists,
yes,
liberals, yeah.
Yes. But in the case of Islam, it just gets a free pass.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of the terror of being thought racist.
Right. Or at worst, an Islamophobe.
Islamophobe, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
a silly word that means nothing.
Yes.
I mean, it's so dumb because, you know, all the people who are accused of being Islamophobes, like you and me and Sam and Ian, we're liberals. We're liberals about everything.
Yes.
I mean, from the time I was a child in my home, I was 7 years old when my parents told me, we're for Kennedy and him trying to let black people go to college in the South. I didn't even know who black people were. There weren't any in my town. I knew we were on their side, and then we were on the side of Cesar Chavez and the lettuce pickers, and then we were on the side... Then we were on the side of the women's movement and poor and the minorities, whatever it was, gay people, the disabled, the abused, the molested.
I had an interview some time ago, maybe about a year or so ago, with Dave Rubin, host of the Rubin Report, where we discussed exactly this. And there are so many different elements to this that it is really difficult to discuss concisely. But I think that the absolute most important element of this is that sometimes elements of the progressive movement get lost in talking points and generalities in a way that makes them support ideas or values that are not truly progressive. The one that is addressed by Richard Dawkins and Bill Maher, the idea around criticism of Islam and Muslims, is one that we have identified. We have also identified one around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I mean, just today, I received a bunch of emails from people saying, David, Israelis just killed more Palestinians. You have to condemn it. And indeed, the Palestinian Authority condemned Israel for killing 2 Palestinians. When you look at the actual information, the 2 Palestinians killed were attackers. One, a 19-year-old law student who killed 2 Jewish Israeli men and was in a shootout with Israeli troops after he grabbed one of his victim's guns and started firing. When you read the reports from many progressive media outlets, you hear, Israel, they killed Palestinians. The reality is these were individuals who killed others. They murdered someone and took their gun. The other was Fadi Aloun, a resident of the eastern Jerusalem neighborhood of Isawiya, who was killed yesterday morning while being pursued by police officers after stabbing a 15-year-old Israeli teen in Jerusalem. One person had just murdered someone and taken their gun. The other was in a police chase after stabbing a kid. When would progressives apply the same standard anywhere else? We have to be thinking more critically here. This doesn't mean that we support Israeli settlements. This doesn't mean that as progressives, we support the right-wing, fundamentalist involved administration of Benjamin Netanyahu. I have been speaking against those anti-progressive ideas for a very long time, but ignoring empirical realities and buying into propaganda is not something that I'm going to be doing. And to the extent that people like Bill Maher and Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris are talking about that, I agree with them. To the extent that those who subscribe to the ideology of Harris, Maher, and Dawkins use that ideology to be xenophobic or racist or whatever, I completely denounce those uses. And we have to be able to speak in nuance here rather than in generalities. That's just the reality. Very interesting clip from the Bill Maher program. Okay, we have to follow up about this story involving Pope Francis and bigoted Kentucky County Clerk Kim Davis. It turns out that much of what we were told about the so-called private meeting of Kim Davis and Pope Francis, where Pope Francis supposedly issued some statement of support to Kim Davis for her bigotry, have been lies. News of the meeting was shocking among many progressives, and part of the reason was that it seemed to really contradict the sort of general tone of Pope Francis's tour in the United States. The Vatican has now released a statement saying the recent meeting between Pope Francis and Kim Davis should not be seen as a form of support of her position on gay marriage licenses. And the most stunning detail that has now emerged is that it was not a private meeting. Kim Davis was in a group of dozens of people that the Pope met with simultaneously. She was apparently invited by the Vatican's ambassador to the U.S. in Washington, and the Vatican added that Kim Davis's anti-gay, bigoted lawbreaking was not even mentioned during the meeting with the Pope. Further, it doesn't appear that the Pope even had any clue about who this woman was. We also learned, and this is angering a lot of people who were thrilled about the supposed meeting with Kim Davis, we have now learned that just before this meeting with dozens of people, including Kim Davis, the Pope actually held a private meeting with a longtime gay friend and his partner. So the question now is, how did Kim Davis get into the same room as the Pope? Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano apparently arranged the Pope's meetings in Washington. He is apparently the one responsible, and he is expected to be removed at the first respectable opportunity. Every indication that the Pope was sort of tricked into meeting Kim Davis in this large group. And the obvious question was, why would Kim Davis, who is not a Catholic, in fact, she's an apostolic Christian, which could not be further from Catholicism, why would she even want to meet with the Pope? That was sort of the ongoing question. Her seeming attention whoring might suggest that she would just want an opportunity to meet with any religious figure of note that would support what she's doing. Absolutely backfiring. And not only is Kim Davis a bigot, not only is Kim Davis refusing to do her taxpayer-funded job, not only is Kim Davis entangled with some of the most retrograde and vile religious elements of the American right, she's also a flat-out liar. There was no private meeting. The Pope offered no support. These are the lowest bottom-feeding losers among all the ranks of bottom feeders, and I'm thrilled that the truth is finally coming out. Really sad story about gun violence. And there are too many of these stories recently. After an argument about a puppy, an 11-year-old boy got his father's shotgun and killed an 8-year-old girl. The 8-year-old girl was Michaela Dyer. The 11-year-old has been charged with first-degree murder. Detectives found a 12-gauge shotgun and a BB pistol at the scene. Neighbors said the death was a result of an argument over a puppy. A neighbor said, quote, "The little boy had the bedroom window open, showing the little girl the puppy. He asked the little girl if he could see the puppy. She laughed and giggled and said no, then turned and looked at her friend and said, 'Let's go get the,' and never got the puppy out." Jefferson County Sheriff Bud McGoig said the shotgun belongs to the 11-year-old boy's father. Honestly, and I know sometimes we joke about this, but I really would like an answer. Would the solution here be that the 8-year-old girl be armed with a gun so that she could have defended herself? We've heard from the More Guns in More Places pro-NRA gun nuts that kids should start going to this NRA baby gun training group, whatever it's called, junior scout. I have no idea what the thing is called at this point. It has some insane name that makes it sound like teddy bears and butterflies. At starting at 5 or 6 years old, right? That gun safety training should start at that point. If that is the case, then would it logically follow that by 8 years old, the girl should have been armed and able to defend herself? Or do we finally need to hold the dad here, whose shotgun was used, legally responsible for what took place here? First degree murder charge for an 11-year-old. Okay, let's grant that by age 11, my little sister, my half sister is 11. She definitely knows right and wrong at this point. She definitely knows if she ever sees a gun somewhere, do not touch the gun. If other people are handling the gun, get away, tell us, we're not going to bring you back there. She knows that stuff. But she's 11. It's not up to her to procure a gun. It's not her responsibility to decide where that presumably legally registered gun is stored. The father has to be charged and kept honest here and responsible for what took place, because an 11-year-old shooting an 8-year-old with a gun is not only about kids. Some adult who was in charge of both that gun and or the kid needs to be held responsible, and it happens way too rarely in this country. Okay, not good news for bigoted Kentucky County Clerk lying Kim Davis, lying now about her meeting with the Pope. The Liberty Council, which is the legal group that has been representing Kim Davis, has been declared a hate group now by the Southern Poverty Law Center. According to the SPLC, they said that the group and its leader, Matt Staver, who's the guy who was victoriously holding Kim Davis's arms in the air at that lunatic rally that took place when she was released from jail, they have opposed LGBTQ rights legislation under the pretense of religious freedom. They have defended Scott Lively, who we've interviewed on this program, who played a role in the Ugandan parliament's adoption of the draconian anti-LGBT bill that had originally included death for gays in some instances. And according to Matt Staver, hate crime legislation is the equivalent of thought crime laws that violate the right to freedom of speech. Liberty Council has come under fire for its management of Kim Davis. Matt Staver claimed that an image of 100,000 people in Peru had gathered to pray for Kim Davis. Turns out that that wasn't at all true. They chalked it up to some kind of misunderstanding. And of course, Liberty Council regularly portrays gay people as perverts, as diseased pedophiles who are putting civilization at risk. Matt Staver doesn't agree. Matt Staver doesn't think his own group is a hate group. He said it is irresponsible and reckless to call someone a hate group because you disagree with them. We're obviously not going to see eye to eye with Matt Staver. I was thinking, though, yesterday, Kim Davis has sort of become the epic right-wing lunatic. She's breaking the law in the name of religious bigotry. She's being represented legally by a hate group. She's lying about her supposed private meeting with the Pope, which we found out was a group meeting in which her homophobic behavior was not even discussed. Slowly but surely, a woman who was completely unknown to just about everyone on the national stage has become the utmost representative of everything that is wrong with the religious right in America today. And it's stunning to me that there are some on the right that still stand behind her. There are still some people who are fans or viewers. Let me take a step back. I don't know that they're fans. They regularly view our YouTube channel and comment on our stories, who defend Kim Davis's actions, who defend breaking the law, who defend this scofflaw opt-out mentality of, hey, if you don't like it, just say it violates your religion as long as your religion is Christianity. Because if it's not, then, hey, wait a second, we've got to review really what religious freedom means. We've had a probably pretty welcome break from new polling data about the 2016 presidential election. We're going to take a look at a little bit of a different angle today. If I asked you about the grammar and spelling of current Republican candidates' supporters, who might you guess has a better grasp on proper grammar and spelling? The Democrats, the Independents, or the Republicans? And which candidates do you think they are supporting? Supporters of Donald Trump and Ben Carson, or do supporters of Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders seem to have a better grasp on the English language? Well, there's a new analysis released yesterday by the proofreading application Grammarly. What they did is they analyzed the spelling and grammar of comments on each presidential candidate's Facebook page, and they were able to distinguish between positive and negative comments. And the analysis found, this may not be a surprise to some of you, that Republican supporters made nearly twice as many grammar and spelling mistakes as Democratic candidate supporters. Grammarly went to each candidate's Facebook page. They took comments that were at least 15 words long, so they eliminated the sort of 3 and 4 word, probably ad hominem type comments. And then they looked at whether the comments 15 words or longer expressed support, neutral, or negative feelings about the candidate. Then, looking at the positive comments, they analyzed whether they were grammatically correct, spelling errors, etc. And the analysis found that for every 100 words written, Democratic supporters made an average of 4.2 mistakes. The average Republican supporter made 8.7 mistakes per 100 words, more than twice as many. It also uncovered, the study did, that Democratic supporters have larger vocabularies, using 300 unique words per 1,000 words, compared to Republicans using only 245 unique words for every 1,000. According to Grammarly, the candidate with the most grammatically and spelling-wise correct comments from supporters is former Rhode Island Governor Lincoln Chafee. This is probably the best news that Lincoln Chafee has had during the entire election. He is just going absolutely nowhere. Donald Trump's backers made the most mistakes of all presidential candidate supporters. I don't know if that's surprising to you. Maybe that comes as a surprise, or maybe that's exactly what you would expect. In order of spelling and grammar correctness, the top candidates were, as I mentioned, Lincoln Chafee, followed by Democrat Jim Webb, followed by Democrat Bernie Sanders, followed by Democrat Martin O'Malley, followed by Democrat Hillary Clinton. The 5 Democrats at the top in terms of the grammar grasp of their supporters. Then came Republicans Carly Fiorina, then Ben Carson, then Lindsey Graham, then George Pataki, then Ted Cruz, and skipping all the way to the very, very bottom of the list, Donald Trump, whose supporters make the most spelling and grammar mistakes. Okay, does this matter? I mean, it doesn't tell us much about the validity, the strength of the policy ideas of the candidates, certainly, but I would argue that it does tell us a little bit about the type of people that each candidate's ideas resonate with. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that Donald Trump's campaign, which has been using xenophobic and anti-immigrant ideas, as well as tax ideas that are 110% divorced from any empirical economic realities, I don't think it's a surprise that the candidate who has those ideas is going to be followed by individuals who may not have the firmest grasp on basic grammar and spelling. I don't think that's a surprise. You decide how much value you think this has, and please also tell me whether you're surprised with these results. And I know I don't even need to say this because I know I'll hear about this anyway. If you just don't buy the results, tell me why the method employed by Grammarly to analyze the comments for grammar and spelling is not a good, accurate, and precise method. Let me know all of that stuff. We'll discuss it soon on an upcoming program.